The DCEU is dead, and with the release of Superman 2025, we finally have ourselves a new Superman. And honestly, these two iterations could not be more different. So in this video, I'll be pitting Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill's Man of Steel against James Gunn and David Corenswet's Man of Tomorrow. It's a battle royale to determine which version is the most super.
Let them fight.
Now don't get me wrong, the gold standard here is still very much Richard Donner and Christopher Reeve's version. Now, even if you find the original dated, the 1978 classic became the first true template for a comic book superhero movie. Now, there were superhero movies before it, but it was the one that really set the standard. It exists in its own little time bubble, in kind of a league of its own. So no, we're gonna stay focused here on the modern iterations. I'm judging these two different Supermen across 4 different categories. Which version best captured the look of the character? Which version had the most appropriate tone? Which had the best interpretation of his godlike powers? How did each handle characterization? And finally, the overall accuracy to the source. At the end, we'll tally up the points and find our winner. Got it? Good. Let the games begin. And by the way, there's gonna be full spoilers for both movies. Number 1, the look. Both these films, they're going in wildly different directions with bringing the iconic hero to screen. On the DCEU side, you have Henry Cavill, who really does look like he was grown in a lab to play Superman. He really does kinda have it all down on lock. The square jaw, the deep voice, and he's built like a tank. When standing next to his co-stars, he really does look like a Superman. Costume designer Michael Wilkinson rightfully leaned into Cavill's physique with a skin-tight costume, which probably was padded, but it certainly didn't look it. Gone were the days of Reeve's overly simple, smooth blue, instead replaced with intricate textures and a big, bold S shield. And that striking S may be my favorite part of this design. I'm a little less enthusiastic about the dour colors, but I will admit that the color choices here, they did fit Snyder's more grounded tone. He had a more muted blue and far less red, and definitely no outward underwear. I can't even imagine Snyder greenlighting that. The shorts were gone, but they were replaced with these silver costume elements, designed to make it feel more alien. Unfortunately, this also means that there's less to break up the blue, and in these wide shots, it can give off a look of kind of being this blue onesie. Lastly, he does have that glorious red cape. Of course, it is 90% CGI, but you can't argue with the results. And despite the lack of red elements to break up the blue, I will say this was a bold redesign that captured some of the most iconic elements and really did look pretty great on screen. Now on the DCU side, you have David Corenswet. He may not be, as big or monstrous as Cavill, but he still does have those iconic qualities. Namely, the square jaw. That's kind of a given, you kind of need that. Corenswet looks the part, completely. He's not the problem here. It's his costume that's a complete mess. Superman's classic look here has been heavily Marvelized. When I say that, I mean some Marvel costumes can often be over-designed. Too many lines that break up areas that really do benefit from simplicity. The Spider-Man costume or Black Widow's Age of Ultron costume, they're good examples of this. But the one that's really coming to mind here is Captain America's costume from the first Avenger. Well, not the first Avenger, that's Captain America. The first Avenger movie with the Avengers. I know, that naming convention. Who would have known it would have been confusing? Anyways, it's a clunky suit full of strange design choices. Overly bright, padded out, a high collar, and added elements that really serve pretty much no purpose. Like, what are these pouches? What do these pouches do? I don't know. Does he ever use them?
Ugh, Mr. Rogers, I almost forgot that suit did nothing for your ass.
That's America's ass.
Now, does this all sound familiar? Well, it should, because that's basically everything wrong with this Superman costume. From the high collar to bizarre lines that are breaking up the blue, and just a padded look that gives the impression that Corenswet just didn't hit the bench presses enough. Although, I'm sure he did. He could definitely probably throw me pretty far, so I wouldn't be critiquing him too far.
It was quite snug because they had made it to my proportions when I screen tested, where I weighed about 195 pounds. And when I walked in for my first costume fitting, I weighed about 235, 240 pounds.
My point is this, that the costume, it looks like a step above a Halloween costume. Even the S shield looks less like an S and more like a do not enter sign. Yet one thing I really do like about this version is those bright colors, a more practical cape, and the return of the outer shorts. And although some people don't like the outward underwear, it was supposed to be based on old wrestlers, and it really does help balance back out the color scheme.
I wear my trunks on the outside of my pants, like it's liberating.
But I have to be honest here that as much as I like Corenswet and what he brought to the role, the costume was really not doing him any favors. It felt like a significant downgrade from what we'd seen before. So yeah, I'm gonna have to make the winner Man of Steel. Next up, the tone. Yeah, let's just get this one out of the way. If there was one major complaint with Man of Steel from both fans and the general audience, it was with the tone. Back in 2013, the successful Dark Knight trilogy was wrapping up, and Snyder had been selected to give Superman a similar dark and gritty treatment. The only problem is, Superman, he really has never been a dark and gritty character. Now, he does have darker stories. I mean, let's be honest here, all characters are at the whims of whatever writer is, writing them at that time. But if we were to look at the whole of this character across his entire run, both from when he started all the way to the modern day, Superman was more known for a brighter color palette, a more optimistic tone, and lighter, kid-friendly themes. And I'm gonna openly admit, I was one of the many thrown by Zack Snyder's tone. But I do think it's important to be fair to where he was coming from, as misplaced as I may think it was. Snyder was aiming for a big biblical epic. He wanted these things to feel dramatic and grand. Now, you can argue whether he was successful in that goal, but with Man of Steel, he was leaning heavily into what worked for the Dark Knight trilogy, while maybe not understanding fully why those ingredients complemented each other the way they did. Not only did he go for that darker aesthetic, but he also tried to add in Nolan's signature non-linear story structure, and he tried to give death and destruction a sense of real, tangible weight. As a result, what he ended up with was a fairly bleak movie about this alien dressed in tights that can leap a tall building in the single bound, but it was all tied with imagery that was meant to evoke the horrors and scenes from 9/11. People buried under rubble and tens of thousands pancaked by alien terraformers. This is not a bright and optimistic world by any stretch. Snyder additionally leaned very heavily in on the Christian imagery, with Superman floating through space in cross poses or framed with Jesus hovering over his shoulder, then recreating the painting of Jesus being lowered from the cross. It's all a little heavy-handed. Not very subtle there, Snyder. It's not like he was the first one to ever do this. I mean, in Superman Returns, you also had a lot of Christian-based imagery, with, again, Superman stabbed in the side, cross poses, and even the Richard Donner film, it was said that he made the spaceship that carries him to Earth look like the Star of Bethlehem. So other people have tried it, but just not as heavy-handed. All of this felt like I was getting hit over the head with, a wooden cross, I guess. I think Snyder forgot that Superman was actually created by the sons of Jewish immigrants. It is the tale of the American dream from this fantastical perspective. Most of the religious parallels actually come from the Old Testament. Moses, not Jesus. Now, if you're skeptical, let's try a little test here. What story am I telling? As the last act to save their son from the death of their people, a mother places a child in a canister that carries him away to safety. He is discovered and adopted by people of a very different cultural and social class. When his adoptive father dies, he is then exiled to a harsh wilderness, where he then discovers the voice of the father. As a changed man, he then returns back to civilization to try and save his people, and match his wits against a bald rich dude. I rest my case, okay? Superman is a savior figure, and this makes it kind of low-hanging fruit and an easy parallel back to Christ. It can also come off as a little too easy and a little pretentious. Contrast that to Gunn, who I'm fairly certain doesn't have a pretentious bone in his body. In fact, he seems a little afraid of taking things too seriously. This version of Superman is basically one big Saturday morning cartoon. It's brighter than walking into a fully stocked candy store. His very world is outlandish and weird. Just look at it. You've got a Superman here who has his superpowered dog that has the exact same powers that he does. He's got a fortress of solitude with an army of irreverent droids. His arch nemesis creates a Rick and Morty pocket universe with near no explanation. Krypton clones just sort of pop out of holes in the ground, and other superheroes are just sort of, there. My favorite part, though, has to be when a space amoeba invades the city and is treated with this sense of nonchalant dismissal. You are either ready to dive headfirst into this world and accept it, or just be quickly left behind. But what Gunn manages to capture is a sense of genuine warmth in his movie. Any of Gunn's natural inclination towards cynicism that you see in, say, Guardians or Suicide Squad, it's instead injected into his supporting characters, like the asshole Justice Gang, Lex Luthor, or maybe to a far lesser extent, Lois Lane. This allows Superman to be left as this big gooey optimist who is constantly looking for the best in humanity. With a good balance of jokes, drama, action, and faithful comic deep cuts, Gunn creates a world that feels both bright but is not without stakes. In some ways, the two directors are almost complete opposites of each other. Snyder can come off as sometimes overly serious, while Gunn can come off as sometimes overly aloof, afraid to let earnest or heartfelt moments just sit and have their chance to just breathe. Too often, Gunn can just cap off every moment with a quick joke, a wink, or a nod. Just like how there are disadvantages to a too real world in Man of Steel, there are advantages and disadvantages to the intangible world of Superman 2025. When Metropolis gets torn in half and buildings start collapsing, yes, it doesn't feel as real or tangible as Man of Steel. We as an audience don't feel like we're being made to relive one of the worst disasters in our nation's history. Corenswet's version also benefits by having his Superman constantly swooping down to save the day. He's always helping innocents escape some sort of danger. So he feels like he's at least proactive in trying to reduce the destruction, not add to it. We rarely, if ever, see someone become casual collateral damage. That is, of course, with exception to one purposeful moment where Lex accidentally kills a man in a forced game of Russian roulette, which honestly was a great scene. Both kind of, dark, but also darkly comedic. Because Superman 2025 is a cartoon by design, effects can often feel unpolished and dangerously close to the CGI slop of a lot of modern CGI-heavy films, especially in the second act, where Superman is swept down a incoherent CGI river. It's kind of bizarre in the fact that it's both too dark, but also has a lot of bright flashing lights. It's unclear on the sense of space, what's happening, or what can be done to escape. And that's not to say Snyder doesn't have these similar moments. Batman v Superman was far more guilty with a seizure-inducing third act, bad CGI characters, unconvincing environments, and flashing lights that burnt out the back of your retinas. The difference is that despite Snyder's many storytelling faults, he knows how to point a camera. It's like his one really good quality. Many of his scenes, especially from BVS, are taken directly from the comic panels of The Dark Knight Rises. His shots, for the most part, they feel purposeful. His framing is clean, and his action is really easy to follow. Too often, Gunn can feel like he's falling into the modern-day action trap of just shooting everyone on a green screen, creating these CGI doppelgangers, and then trying to, smash them together to make an action scene interesting in post. It's bright, fast, but also kind of sloppy and flat. As many points as I can give Snyder, though, for being able to make a pretty image, it's still hard to defend how he spent those talents. Often in his effort to deconstruct his hero, he delivers this overwhelmingly dour tone that felt as if I was trapped in a perpetual funeral. It is a sad affair when you come out of a Superman movie of all things, feeling like you just put down your dog. Gunn, however, he's giving you those warm, bubbly feelings of picking up a new pup from the adoption center. It is full of energy and a promise for an interesting tomorrow. Even the return of the John Williams classic score is as welcoming and familiar as a warm cup of coffee from out of the cold. That's just a feeling I never got with the old DCEU. This new Superman feels like something you can actually take your kids to, which I think is pretty fitting for a character that was made for kids. For that reason, I think Gunn did a much better job of capturing the spirit of the comic. Superman 2025 wins the round. Number 3, powers. It's important to remember that before Man of Steel, Superman was sort of seen as old-fashioned and cheesy. Give some credit where it's due. Snyder brought the character into the 2010s and made him a certifiable badass. In some ways, he went too far by making him actually completely terrifying. Again, Snyder may struggle in characterization and story, but he has an excellent eye for visuals, and never was this more evident than in Man of Steel. In his first film, every punch felt like it had weight behind it. His use of super speed felt just snappy and smooth, and his laser eyes looked actually really deadly. Even his depiction of the super senses felt overwhelmingly chaotic, and it played into how Kal-El defeats the Kryptonians later on. And yeah, those Krypton versus Krypton sequences, they did look incredible, whether that be the Smallville brawl or the Dragon Ball Z fight with Zod in the film climax. It felt like a clash of titans, where two people alone could level an entire city, and did. Superman accomplishes probably his most impressive physical feats in the sequel, Batman v Superman. Here he survives a nuke or pulls a giant ship through ice, but points have to be knocked off for them completely neutering his power in the titular fight. Granted, Batman did eventually hit him with that good old kryptonite. No, I'm more wondering why Superman didn't just float high in the air, out of reach, and then clearly say, hey, Lex is manipulating us into fighting. He kidnapped my mom. And if Batman says, I'm still going to kill you, then just laser him in the face. Or use super speed and super strength to smush him like a tin can. Yeah, the version of Superman we saw at the end of Man of Steel probably should have flattened Bruce in about 2 seconds. And Corenswet's Superman, he's nothing to scoff at either, but he is a more vulnerable version. We do often see him getting his ass handed to him. The cold open has him crash in the snow, coughing blood in the fetal position. From there, he gets beat up by his clone multiple times, chokes on a liquid metal girl. I'm not sure how to word that better. That is just what happens. He nearly gets flattened by this kaiju he refuses to kill. He gets imprisoned at one point in a tiny box. And he's nearly washed down a river into a black hole that don't ask if you haven't seen, okay? It's a hard one to explain. He is not an indestructible man. Gunn's good at putting him in positions of danger without ever feeling he's weakened for the sake of the script. So while this may be good for the stakes, it maybe is not so good for Superman's reputation as, being the unstoppable, indestructible hero that we all know.
As a child, the reason I like Batman better than Superman was because Superman was just too strong at times. And I didn't want to have one guy who was so much stronger than anybody else that, a guy with a bow and arrow didn't matter.
But don't get too down on him. Corenswet's physical feats may very well be more impressive than anything we see Cavill's version accomplish, whether that be lifting up an entire kaiju or holding up an entire collapsing building. His Superman does show those moments of true godlike strength, which kind of makes it all the more disappointing when his fights with his Kryptonian clone often devolve into mere punch-ups or sluggish wrestling matches. They lack the same scale that we see from Man of Steel. When Ultraman, he breaks Superman's arm in the film, it really looks no worse than something you see in, like a MMA fight. But when Superman snaps Zod's neck in Man of Steel, it's like the whole building was hit by a shockwave. Even thinking back on it, I'm not even sure if we ever see Corenswet's version use super speed. Well, except for maybe when flying, but he seems to almost have to build up to that momentum. At the end of the day, neither of these guys are the sort you'd want to tug on their cape. But only one of these took a character who had been seen as cheesy and not to be taken seriously and turned him into a powerhouse so scary that pop culture now can't stop making stories about evil Supermen. Now that's an accomplishment in and of itself. Winner here, Man of Steel. Next up, Characterization. Now we come to the big one. Which of these two better captures the essence of this pop culture icon? When you say Superman, what are the first 3 words to come to mind? Truth, justice, and the American way. Or at least it should be. Superman is a big blue Boy Scout. He is a guy with godlike powers who could take over the world in an afternoon, but doesn't because he's a big softy with a heart of gold. As nice as this sounds, this often makes him very difficult to write. Writers for Superman often have to toe the line between turning him into a self-parody or devolving into a Mary Sue, a figure too powerful to ever be in danger and too good to ever really grapple with moral complexities. Snyder was never able to really thread this needle. His answer to ultimate power and ultimate good was to drag down Superman to our level. He became more interested in deconstructing Superman, but the problem here was he never actually built him up in the first place.
I'm deep in Watchmen. I'm deep in deconstructing superheroes. It's like, hey, do you want to make a Superman movie? It's like, well, I'm about to tear him down. I'm going to kill him. I'm not interested in fixing him or making him interesting. He's the enemy right now.
As I've said in other videos, you can't deconstruct someone that's never been built up. As a result, I guess you do get a Superman you've never seen before. A mopey pessimist. A Superman told by his father that he should let a bus full of kids drown rather than expose himself to the world.
What was I supposed to do? Just let them die?
Maybe. There's more at stake here than just our lives, Clark, or the lives of those around us.
And then a mother who told him that he owes the world absolutely nothing.
Be anything they need you to be, or be none of it. You don't owe this world a thing. You never did.
You get a Superman that bemoans as he flies off frowning that no one stays good in this world.
No one stays good in this world.
Or one that's just willing to destroy a jerk's entire livelihood just out of pure pettiness. This here is our sad boy Superman. Snyder wanted to turn Superman into this deity, one that carries the weight of being a hero like some great burden, a god who sometimes looks down on us mortals like ants as he hovers and just broods above us. This Superman, he's not spending a lot of time rescuing kittens out of trees, not when he's too busy raining hellfire from above. Now, the debate has gone back and forth on how much Superman is actually responsible for the destruction of Metropolis. This was a big sticking point for audiences, so I don't want to minimize it. In my opinion, it's pretty clear cut. Superman flies into his Fortress of Solitude, which at this point is being used by Zod to terraform the planet. He then tells him,
Krypton had its chance!
Before genociding his entire race by destroying the ship with his heat vision. But the worst part actually isn't in Man of Steel, it's in Batman v Superman, when we see the ship crash into no less than about 7 skyscrapers and then plummet into the heart of Metropolis, no doubt killing tens of thousands. Superman then stops and gets out to have kissy time with his girlfriend as the ashes of the dead rain around him. All of this looks pretty bad. It's not a great look for our boy in blue. More damnably, we don't see Superman ever directly save anyone in this sequence, at least not until the very end. Even when his co-workers are buried in rubble, crying and choking on dust, he's a no-show. If you're going to have a big moment where Superman saves someone, this should have been it. At one point, he even has this tanker thrown at him, and instead of stopping it, he lightly hops over it so it can fly behind him and blow up an entire building. Or a parking garage, I don't know, whatever it is. I hope no one was in there. Yes, he saves this small family at the very, very end. But I kind of suspect that was only there so the writers could corner the character into barbarically snapping the villain's neck with his bare hands. This is not a Superman with qualms about killing. He kills his first villain, he kills Doomsday, he almost certainly kills this terrorist by driving him through several concrete walls, and he even moves over killing Batman to save his mother, just playing into Lex's hands. I guess he doesn't really care.
I have to go to Gotham to convince him to help me, or he has to die.
Given the morals imparted to him by his parents, none of this really comes as a surprise. His movies are directly showcasing how horrific his powers are, and they're constantly questioning what would happen if he becomes evil. This isn't just us thinking how awful it is as an audience watching a city collapse into ruins. These movies are directly wanting you to think about this. And it's a concept that both The Boys and Invincible eventually took to a logical conclusion. Not only is this character not optimistic, I'm not even sure if this version of the character is morally good. So while I may have given Cavill's version full points for looking the part, his Superman could not be further removed from his comic counterpart. And this wasn't an accident, this was completely by design. Gunn, on the other hand, kind of gave himself the job of rehabilitating the character after the DCEU. And it's no small task. He still had to contend with those big challenges I mentioned before. The challenge of being infinitely powerful and morally good. And I think Gunn took what I like to call the Quentin Tarantino approach. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, in Kill Bill, Bill has this monologue about Superman and how he's different from other heroes because Superman is his true identity and Clark Kent is his fake alter ego.
A staple of the superhero mythology is there's the superhero and there's the alter ego. Batman is actually Bruce Wayne. Spider-Man is actually Peter Parker. He has to put on a costume to become Spider-Man. And it is in that characteristic Superman stands alone. Superman didn't become Superman. Superman was born Superman. When Superman wakes up in the morning, he's Superman. What Kent wears, the glasses, the business suit, that's the costume.
Now, some will debate this interpretation, and it really does admittedly flip-flop depending on who you've got writing the comic. However, Gunn seems to be an avid supporter of this interpretation. Clark Kent here is a nerdy parody. He is really nothing more than a mask. Superman is his true persona. It is who he is when he's in the red and blue, when he's alone with Lois in their apartment, or when he's just visiting his parents. He's not this Kryptonian god, but rather this immigrant boy raised by loving parents and taught to do good with the gifts he's given. He's doing his best to do what's right, even if he doesn't always know what the right thing is. In this way, Gunn reverts Superman back to being just a normal dude. He's a man struggling to use his talents and tools to do the most good in a world that is more complex maybe than his own naive sentimentalism. Much like Man of Steel, this version of Superman comes head to head with complicated geopolitics And just like the Man of Steel version, he tries to bulldoze his way through them.
I'm not saying he shouldn't act. I'm saying he shouldn't act unilaterally.
Must there be a Superman?
There is.
In many ways, this almost feels like it's drawing from Steve Rogers' arc from the MCU. Now, Captain America is another good-hearted Boy Scout that refuses to do wrong.
This isn't freedom. This is fear.
However, Steve is more physically vulnerable than Clark, so Gunn counters this by making Superman, at least his version, more emotionally vulnerable. A younger one, uncertain in his romances, uncertain with his place amongst other heroes, and uncertain with his role as a savior. His story largely hinges on learning that his strength does not come from his Kryptonian roots, but rather from his humanity. Now, I could argue, the effectiveness again in the delivery of this arc. It can be clunky at times, but given the ending, this was the clear intention, and it really does form the heart of the movie. This new Superman retains his naive outlook, even in the face of superheroes who roll their eyes when he tries to save squirrels or even refuses to kill a rampaging monster. He's a trusting figure who sees the best in people, even when, he probably shouldn't. He's a more innocent Superman, but he's still powerful enough that he can still afford to be innocent. When it comes down to it, that may not be the big, confident beacon of greater good that some are looking for, but it is still far more true to the spirit of the character and what the original creators wanted him to stand for. A Superman who may not know how best to do good, but is always striving for it against the odds. The winner of this round has to be Superman 2025. Final round, accuracy to the source. I thought a good long time about how to come at this one without stepping on familiar ground covered in the previous categories. When I talk about accuracy to the source, I'm looking at how well does it capture the world, supporting characters, and the general feel of the comics. Both these versions are making some significant changes. The largest and most divisive for Superman 2025 will certainly be the change that Superman was sent by his parents to conquer Earth. Now, take that with a grain of salt, of course. There's some ambiguity here, as this relies on us taking Lex Luthor at his word and that he didn't tamper with the recording. But I'm thinking if he can rip a hole off screen in the space-time continuum without breaking a sweat, I'm sure he wouldn't have too much trouble with a little deepfake. But even if we took that change at face value, Superman still makes significant other changes, such as Pa Kent still being alive and well. Not to mention you've got Ultraman, who was changed from this alternate dimension Superman into just what is basically Bizarro. Yet for everything Gunn changes, he delivers another authentic, just kind of deep cut from the comics. You get a comic-accurate, just really unlikable, dickish Guy Gardner, and a breakout role for Mr. Terrific. Mr. Terrific has some of the best moments of just kind of stoic, dry comedy mixed with genuine fun action set pieces, timed to the classic James Gunn needle drop. Even the romance here between Lois and Clark feels true to the comic, but Gunn is finding a new way to come at it at kind of a fresh angle. They are a young couple who already are intimate, but unsure in their commitment, as they try to decide if they can make it work between their wildly different lives and what is genuinely a massive conflict of interest. Bosnahan is fantastic in her role, and her chemistry with Corenswet is naturalistic and pretty endearing in moments. This little coupling is considerably a step above Snyder's clumsy attempt, where Lois and Clark here seem to only lock lips at the end because their names happen to be Lois and Superman. The romance is near non-existent before this point. By the time we get to the second film, they're already together and their relationship is fairly surface level. The best stuff between the two is actually probably the stuff in Justice League, where one of them is dead. Not exactly sparks flying when the best thing you can say about a relationship is it's at its high point when half the relationship is 6 feet under the ground. One of the biggest wins in James Gunn's corner certainly has to be Lex Luthor, where Snyder chose to interpret this character as a Riddler-esque tech bro in the vein of Mark Zuckerberg. Just a completely bizarre performance from Jesse Eisenberg that involved him shoving Jolly Ranchers in people's mouths, leaving them jars of pee, and just giggling like a schoolgirl.
Blah, blah, blah.
True!
No. No, what am I?
Gunn, on the other hand, unleashes a full billionaire egomaniac, similar to the real versions that now exist in our world. Holt's Lex may very well be the best Lex Luthor we've ever gotten on the big screen. Not on the small screen, though. I think Smallville still has him beat.
I am the villain of the story.
But Holt's Lex is a megalomaniacal freak who is so wrapped up in his wealth and self-importance that he believes nothing is beneath him in his quest to rid the world of Superman. He is a man so consumed with hate that at times he's literally crying from how much he hates this guy. Gunn's greatest weakness may not be so much what he changes as how much he tries to fit in this package. It is a packed film with so many plots, subplots, and characters all fighting for the space and chance to breathe. Snyder, he's sticking far more to familiar territory and drawing from direct storylines, such as the classic origin, Zod's invasion of Earth, which we already saw in Superman 2, The Dark Knight Returns, and the death of Superman. Clear sources. Now, he still drifts from these sources in key ways. While his origin may feel more true to the source, with the mother and father sending Kal-El away for selfless reasons, it has its own alterations. Again, it's like these directors are doing the reverse here. James Gunn is changing the Kryptonian parents in major ways, while Snyder is changing the Earthbound parents in major ways. Ma and Pa Kent, in Man of Steel, they're more interested in protecting their son rather than instilling any kind of good values in him. As a result, Superman willingly lets his father die for really no reason when he could have easily saved him. Superman later is directly responsible for dooming his entire race. And you have other things, like Doomsday reinterpreted as a genetically modified dead Zod, a Fortress of Solitude that is less like a fortress and more like a spaceship that kamikazes half a dozen buildings. And if you're looking for that sweet Jimmy Olsen, you're going to need a shovel because he's buried somewhere in a shallow desert grave. That's neither here nor there. Any adaptation is going to have changes from the source. Both Gunn and Snyder have countless alterations, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Yet Gunn seems to have a genuine interest in kind of just like the hidden gems of comics. He really likes to dive into that mine and find the unique elements that we haven't seen on screen before. Despite Superman 2025 being the first movie in the series, this universe already feels far more lived in than the DCEU Superman, which had, I guess, 2 movies or 2 1/3 film under its belt. The world of Superman 2025 feels like a reflection of the rich, superpowered insanity of the comics, filled with colorful characters, relationships with history beyond what we've seen, and future potential to take things in new, interesting directions. Just the presence of something like the Justice Gang makes it feel like there's a whole world out there that we haven't seen yet. And if you're trying to create a new universe, I can't think of a better way to start it. For that reason, the final point is going to Superman 2025. And with that, let's bring this thing to a close. Man of Steel with 2 points, and Superman 2025 with 3. At the end of the day, Snyder had an eye for visuals, for bringing in gorgeous framing and effects, creating a coherent world aesthetic, from Krypton to the ships to Superman's suit, just making all his powers look cool on screen. But where he thrived in visuals, he struggled to get a grasp on the character and what made him tick.
Superman was never real.
This is where Gunn succeeds in a big way. Yes, Gunn's script can often be messy, sloppy, overstuffed at times, but this is a hard character to bring to the screen. I don't envy anyone's task in trying to do it. And Gunn finds an angle to make him both relatable and entertaining, to make his world and supporting cast engaging and a place worth revisiting again. More than anything, he creates a Superman worth rooting for, who has humanity and compassion. It's hard to root for the distant alien god of Man of Steel. The Superman of 2025, he feels like someone we might meet at a barbecue in the Midwest. And when he then flies off to the old John Williams tune, we are there with him for that adventure. That, more than anything, is what makes this new movie work. And that's all I have. Do you agree with my assessment? Who do you think wins each category? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, subscribe for more historical film flashbacks and modern movie analysis. Please, keep those reels turning. Thank you.